I should have known something was wrong when Marcus started checking the locks twice every night. It was October 2020, and from the outside, our life looked like something from a magazine spread. Beautiful house in Cherry Hills Village, successful husband running his own investment firm, bright 5-year-old son who still believed his parents hung the moon. I was 32, working as a senior loan officer at First National Bank of Denver, with a marriage that had weathered 7 years and seemed stronger for it. But perfect lives, I've learned, are often the most fragile ones. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday evening in late September. I was giving Daniel his bath when I heard Marcus downstairs moving furniture around. When I came down, 20 minutes later, he was installing a new deadbolt on our front door. "What's that for?" I asked, watching him work with uncharacteristic intensity. "Just upgrading our security," he said without looking up. "Can't be too careful these days." "Since when do you worry about security?" Marcus paused, his screwdriver hovering over the lock mechanism. "Since I realized how much I have to lose. At the time, I thought it was sweet." Looking back, I realize it was the first sign that Marcus was terrified. The changes started small. New locks on all the doors. A security system that made our house beep constantly. Motion sensor lights that turned our peaceful suburban street into something resembling a prison yard. When I asked about the expense, Marcus waved it off. "The business is doing great, Sarah. We can afford a little peace of mind." But Marcus didn't seem peaceful. He jumped when the phone rang, constantly looked over his shoulder when we went out, and started insisting that I pick up Daniel from preschool instead of letting him ride the bus. "I just like knowing where you both are," he explained when I protested. Then came the bruises. I first noticed them in early October. Dark marks on Marcus's ribs that he claimed came from a pickup basketball game. Then a cut on his knuckles that he said happened when he punched a wall in frustration over a difficult client. When I suggested he see a doctor about his apparent clumsiness, he laughed it off. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just been working too hard not paying attention." But I was paying attention. I noticed how he winced when he hugged me. I saw how he favored his left side when he got out of bed. I watched him pop Advil like candy and tell me it was just stress headaches. The phone calls were the worst part. They always came late at night after Daniel was asleep. Marcus would answer on the first ring, speaking in hushed tones that I could barely hear through our bedroom door. But sometimes, when he thought I was sleeping, his voice would rise just enough for me to catch fragments. "Told you I need more time." "Not that kind of money." "My family has nothing to do with this." When I asked him about these calls, Marcus would dismiss them as West Coast clients or investors in different time zones. But his explanations never quite made sense, and the calls were becoming more frequent. One night in early October, I pretended to be asleep when the phone rang at 1:47 a.m. Marcus answered it immediately as if he'd been waiting. "I told you I'm working on it," he whispered, but his voice was tight with fear. "The deal in Phoenix fell through, but I have other options." A long pause. "Don't threaten me. I've always been good for my debts." Another pause, longer this time. "My family is off limits. We agreed on that from the beginning." When he hung up, Marcus sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, his head in his hands. I wanted to reach out to him to ask what was wrong, but something about his posture warned me to stay quiet. The next morning, I found a crumpled piece of paper in Marcus's jacket pocket while doing laundry. It was a receipt from a pawn shop in downtown Denver, dated 3 days earlier. Marcus had sold his Rolex, the one I'd given him for our 5th anniversary, for $8,000. When I confronted him about it, he had an explanation ready. I needed quick cash for a time-sensitive investment opportunity. The watch was just sitting in a drawer anyway. An $80,000 opportunity that couldn't wait for a bank transfer. "Sometimes in my business, you have to move fast," Marcus said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. That evening, our business partner David Chen called me directly, which was unusual. David and Marcus had started Mitchell Capital Partners together 6 years earlier, and while we were friendly, he typically communicated through Marcus. "Sarah, I hope you don't mind me calling," David said, his voice carefully neutral. "I wanted to touch base about some irregularities in our accounts." My stomach dropped. What kind of irregularities? Discrepancies in some of our Vegas investments. Marcus assured me he's handling it, but I thought you should know there might be some financial adjustments coming up. The Vegas investments. There was a pause. Marcus didn't mention the Nevada portfolio. We've been working with some private investors there. High-yield opportunities, but demanding partners. Demanding how? Just demanding, David said carefully. Look, I'm sure Marcus will explain everything. I just wanted to give you a heads up that things might be tight for a while. After David hung up, I sat in our kitchen staring at my phone. Marcus had never mentioned Vegas investments. He'd never mentioned financial problems. And he certainly hadn't mentioned demanding partners who called at 2 a.m. That night, I waited until Marcus fell asleep, then crept into his home office. His laptop was password protected, but I knew he used Daniel's birthday for everything. The screen lit up, revealing months of emails I'd never seen. Most were routine business correspondence, but one folder labeled NV Ventures caught my attention. The emails inside made my blood run cold. Marcus, time is running out. My associates are not patient men. S. Payment due in full by November 15th. No extensions, no excuses. S.E.S. Your family is beautiful. Would hate for anything to happen to them. So, the last email was from 3 days ago. Consider this your final notice. S. Attached was a photo that made me physically sick. It showed Daniel playing in our backyard, taken from outside our fence. Someone had been watching our house. Someone had been watching our son. I printed the emails with shaking hands, then closed the laptop and crept back to bed. Marcus was still sleeping, but even in rest, his face looked strained and worried. The next morning, I waited until Marcus left for work, then called David Chen. David, I need to know exactly what's going on with these Vegas investors. There was a long silence. Sarah, I think you should talk to Marcus about this. Marcus isn't talking, but someone sent me a photo of Daniel taken from outside our house. So you're going to tell me what I need to know to protect my son. David sighed heavily. The Vegas deal went bad 6 months ago. Really bad. Marcus borrowed money from some private lenders to cover the losses, thinking he could make it back quickly. But the people he borrowed from, they're not traditional lenders. What does that mean? It means they collect debts through intimidation. Marcus owes them close to $2 million, and they're getting impatient. $2 million. I felt the room spin around me. Marcus has been trying to raise the money through other investments, but nothing's panning out fast enough. Sarah, these people don't negotiate. They don't offer payment plans. They collect what they're owed one way or another. I hung up and sat in my car in the bank parking lot, trying not to throw up. My husband owed $2 million to criminals who were threatening our family. He'd been living with this terror for months, trying to handle it alone, while I complained about new door locks and late-night phone calls. That evening, I confronted Marcus with the printed emails. He went pale when he saw them, then sank into a kitchen chair like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. How did you find these? That's not the point. The point is that someone is threatening to hurt Daniel, and you didn't tell me. Marcus buried his face in his hands. I was trying to protect you. I thought I could fix it before you had to know. Fix it how? We don't have $2 million, Marcus. I've been working on some deals, big deals that could pay everything off and then some. I just need a little more time. Time we don't have, I said, pointing to the photo of Daniel. They were in our backyard, Marcus. They were watching our son. I know. Marcus's voice broke. I know, and it's killing me. But Sarah, if I go to the police, they'll want to know about all my business dealings. Some of the investments I made to try to cover this, they weren't exactly legal. What kind of investments? Insider trading, bribery, some money laundering. I was desperate, and I made choices I'm not proud of. I stared at my husband, the man I'd loved and trusted for 7 years, and realized I didn't know him at all. So, our choices are to let criminals threaten our family, or to let the FBI investigate your illegal activities. There's a third option, Marcus said quietly, which is, I disappear. If they think I'm dead, they can't collect from me. And if I'm not around, they have no reason to bother you and Daniel. You want to fake your death? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It's not what I want. It's what I have to do to keep you both safe. Marcus, that's insane. That's fraud on top of everything else. And what about Daniel? What about me? You'd just abandon us. I'd be saving you, Marcus said desperately. Don't you understand? These people will hurt you to get to me. They'll hurt Daniel. The only way to protect you is to make them think I'm gone. No, I said firmly. We'll figure this out together. We'll sell the house, liquidate the business, borrow from my parents. $2 million, Sarah. Even if we could raise it, what's to stop them from demanding more next month? These people don't just go away. We fought until nearly dawn, but Marcus had already made up his mind. 2 weeks later, he kissed me goodbye, told me he was going to Phoenix for a last-ditch business meeting, and disappeared into a Colorado avalanche that would destroy my world and reshape it entirely. The last thing he said to me was, "Tell Daniel that Daddy loves him more than all the stars in the sky. And Sarah, this isn't goodbye forever. Someday when it's safe, I'll find a way back to you." I believed him then. I had no idea it would take 3 years and a chance encounter on a plane to Miami to discover what safe really meant. October 15th, 2020, 2:47 p.m. The timestamp is burned into my memory like a scar. I was at my desk at First National Bank trying to concentrate on loan applications while my mind churned over my last conversation with Marcus. He'd left for his Phoenix meeting 3 days earlier, and I hadn't heard from him since. Given everything I now knew about his situation, the silence terrified me. When my phone rang, displaying a Colorado number, I didn't recognize. My first thought was relief. Marcus was calling from a different phone, probably with good news about raising the money. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is Ranger Tom Bradley with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I'm calling about your husband, Marcus Mitchell." The world tilted sideways. "Is he hurt?" "Ma'am, I'm afraid there's been an accident. Your husband was backcountry skiing near Vail Pass yesterday when a massive avalanche occurred. We found his rental car at the trailhead and pieces of his equipment in the debris field, but what?" I could barely form words. "The avalanche was catastrophic. The debris field covers several acres, and the conditions are too unstable for recovery operations. Based on the evidence and the time elapsed, there's no possibility of survival. I'm very sorry for your loss." I don't remember hanging up the phone. I don't remember the drive home or picking up Daniel from preschool. The next clear memory I have is standing in our kitchen at 6 p.m., holding our 5-year-old son while he asked questions I couldn't answer. "Where's Daddy? When is Daddy coming home? Did Daddy get lost in the snow?" I held Daniel tighter, breathing in the scent of his strawberry shampoo, and tried to make sense of what had happened. Marcus had told me he was going to Phoenix for business. Instead, he'd driven to Colorado and died alone in an avalanche. Had this been the disappearing plan he'd mentioned? Had he intended to fake his death and somehow survived long enough to actually die? The thought made me sick with grief and fury. If Marcus had staged his death to protect us, the plan had backfired spectacularly. Instead of escaping his creditors, he'd left me and Daniel completely vulnerable to them. The official investigation moved quickly. Marcus had registered for a backcountry skiing permit under his own name Wednesday morning. The Vail ski shop confirmed he'd rented advanced equipment around 8 a.m. 2 other skiers reported seeing a man matching Marcus's description heading toward expert terrain around 10:30 a.m. The avalanche occurred at approximately 11:15 a.m., triggered by unstable snow conditions after 3 days of heavy precipitation. "The debris field is massive," Ranger Bradley explained during one of his many phone calls. "We're talking about tons of snow rocks and broken trees covering several football fields. Even if we could locate his body, which is unlikely, the area remains too dangerous for extended recovery operations." 3 weeks later, the death certificate arrived. Marcus Mitchell, age 34, cause of death. Accidental death by avalanche. I held that piece of paper in our kitchen and felt nothing. No relief that his suffering was over, no closure, just hollow emptiness that seemed to echo through our entire house. The funeral was surreal. We buried an empty casket at Crown Hill Cemetery because there was no body to bury. David Chen gave a eulogy about Marcus's love of adventure and calculated risks, never mentioning the financial disaster that had driven him to that mountain. He lived life on his own terms, David said, and I wanted to scream that Marcus's terms had included abandoning his family to face the consequences of his mistakes alone. After the service, I found myself shaking hands with people I'd never met, business associates, former clients, investors I didn't recognize. They all spoke about Marcus like they knew secrets I wasn't privy to. Marcus always said family was everything, one middle-aged man told me, and I had to excuse myself to throw up in the cemetery bathroom. That night, I sat in Marcus's office going through his papers for insurance claims. The life insurance policies totaled $2.1 million, far more than I'd known about. When I called the insurance company, they explained that Marcus had increased his coverage substantially 6 months earlier. Mr. Mitchell said he wanted to ensure his family would be financially secure in case anything happened. The agent explained. Very responsible of him, but responsibility wasn't the word I would have used. As I dug deeper into Marcus's affairs, I found evidence of the financial juggling act he'd been performing for months. Credit cards maxed out and paid off repeatedly. Business accounts shuffled between banks. A pattern of desperate moves that painted a picture of a man trying to buy time he didn't have. The most disturbing discovery came when I found a safe deposit box key hidden in Marcus's desk. Inside the box was $50,000 in cash, a passport I'd never seen, and a letter addressed to me, Sarah. If you're reading this, then my plan failed, and I'm really gone. The money in this box is clean. Savings from before everything went wrong. Use it to disappear if you have to. Take Daniel somewhere these people can't find you. I never meant for it to end this way. I thought I could fix everything, could protect you both, by removing myself from the equation. I was wrong about so many things, but I was never wrong about loving you and Daniel more than my own life. Watch for a man named Silas. Thin, balding scar through his left eyebrow. He's the one who takes photographs. If you ever see him run. All my love, Marcus. P.S. The ranger who called you is Tom Bradley. He's a good man in a bad situation. Don't blame him for what happened. I read the letter 3 times before it sank in. Tom Bradley, the ranger who'd called with news of Marcus's death, had been involved in whatever Marcus was planning. The avalanche might have been real, but Marcus's presence there hadn't been coincidental, which meant he'd intended to fake his death and had somehow died for real in the process. The irony was devastating. Marcus had died trying to disappear, leaving me to face alone the very dangers he'd died trying to protect us from. 3 months later, I started seeing suspicious cars parked across from our house. 6 months later, I found a note tucked under my car's windshield wiper. We know you have it. We'll be in touch. I never saw Silas face to face, but I felt his presence constantly. Every unexpected phone call made me jump. Every knock at the door sent me into panic mode. I installed more security cameras, changed our daily routines constantly, and slept with a baseball bat beside my bed. But the promised contact never came. Gradually, the suspicious cars disappeared. The threatening notes stopped appearing. Either Marcus's death had convinced his creditors that there was nothing left to collect, or they'd found more profitable targets. By Daniel's 6th birthday, I'd almost convinced myself we were safe. The insurance money had made us financially secure, and the mysterious watchers seemed to have moved on. I started to believe that Marcus's sacrifice, intentional or not, had achieved its purpose. I had no idea that 2,000 miles away in Mexico, my supposedly dead husband was working 16-hour days laying concrete and washing dishes, methodically paying off a debt that would eventually bring us all back together in ways I never could have imagined. The insurance money bought us safety, but it couldn't buy us peace. I kept Daniel and myself in a state of constant vigilance for the first year after Marcus's death. We moved to a smaller house in a different neighborhood. I changed banks, switched Daniel to a new preschool, and varied our daily routines religiously. Every face in a crowd was potentially Silas. Every car that followed us for more than 2 blocks sent me into panic mode. But children adapt faster than adults, and Daniel gradually settled into our new normal. He stopped asking when Daddy was coming back from heaven and started building new memories that didn't include his father. I watched him learn to ride a bike, ace his kindergarten spelling tests, and make friends who had never known him as part of a 2-parent family. The hardest part was the silence. I couldn't tell anyone, not my parents, not my closest friends, not even Daniel's pediatrician, why we'd really moved, why I'd changed jobs, why I jumped every time someone knocked on our door. As far as the world knew, I was a widow adjusting to single motherhood, not a woman whose husband had died trying to fake his death to escape dangerous criminals. Daniel's 6th birthday party nearly broke me. I'd planned a superhero celebration at our new house, complete with a Batman cake and games in the backyard. Everything was perfect until the moment he blew out his candles. "What did you wish for, sweetheart?" I asked, camera ready to capture his joy. "I wish Daddy could come back from heaven and play superheroes with me," Daniel said matter-of-factly. "Just for one day." The other parents smiled at his innocence, but I had to excuse myself to the bathroom, where I cried until I threw up. Because I knew something Daniel didn't. His father might not be in heaven at all. He might be alive somewhere, living under a false name, while his son grieved for him. That night, after the guests had gone home and Daniel was asleep clutching his new action figures, I made a decision that would haunt me for years. I called the number Tom Bradley had given me, the one I was supposed to use only in case of emergency. Sarah." Tom answered immediately, as if he'd been waiting for my call. "And I need to know," I said without preamble. "Is Marcus really dead?" There was a long pause. "What makes you ask that?" "Because I found his letter. Because I know you were helping him plan something. Because my son just wished his father would come back from heaven, and I don't know whether to hope that's possible or to pray that it isn't." "Sarah." Tom's voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. "Some questions are better left unasked. That's not good enough. I need to know if I'm mourning a dead man or enabling a lie." Another pause, longer this time. The avalanche was real. The danger was real. Whatever Marcus was planning, it ended that day on the mountain. "But is he dead, Tom, yes or no?" "According to every official record, Marcus Mitchell died in an avalanche on October 18th, 2020. That's the only truth I can give you." He hung up without saying goodbye, leaving me with more questions than answers. But his careful phrasing told me everything I needed to know. Marcus Mitchell was officially dead, but that didn't necessarily mean the man I'd married was gone. I spent the next 2 years in a strange form of limbo grief, mixed with hope, anger tangled with understanding. I threw myself into rebuilding our lives, getting promoted to senior loan officer, buying a house in a good school district, creating the stable foundation Daniel deserved. But late at night, when the house was quiet, and Daniel was sleeping peacefully, I'd lie awake, wondering if somewhere out there Marcus was lying awake too, wondering if his son still remembered him. The wondering ended on a Tuesday morning in March 2023, when I opened our mailbox to find an envelope with no return address. Inside was a bank statement for an account I'd never opened, showing regular deposits totaling exactly $10,000. Deposited every year on Daniel's birthday for the past 3 years. The deposits came from different locations: Tucumcari, New Mexico, El Paso, Texas, Phoenix, Arizona. Someone was following our lives closely enough to know Daniel's birthday and that someone had access to significant amounts of cash. That night, I called my best friend Jennifer, the only person who knew even part of our story. "Jen, hypothetically, if someone you thought was dead turned out to be alive, would you want to know?" "That depends," Jennifer said carefully. "Would knowing make your life better or worse?" "I honestly don't know." "Then maybe the question isn't whether you want to know. Maybe the question is whether Daniel deserves to know." 3 weeks later, I booked our trip to Miami. Not because I was ready to move on, but because I was tired of living in the space between grief and hope. Daniel deserved better than a mother who was afraid to be happy. We both deserved better than a life defined by questions we were afraid to ask. I had no idea that the answers were already on their way to find us. The morning of our flight to Miami, Daniel was awake before sunrise, sitting on his packed suitcase in the living room like a soldier ready for deployment. "Is it time to go to the airport yet?" he asked for the 4th time in 20 minutes. "Not for 3 more hours, sweetheart." I laughed, but his excitement was infectious. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely hopeful about something. We spent the morning playing travel games and eating breakfast shaped like airplanes. Daniel had grown into a thoughtful 8-year-old with Marcus's quick wit and my stubborn streak. He asked complex questions about ocean currents and airplane mechanics, already showing signs of the analytical mind that would serve him well in life. "Mom, do you think Miami has different kinds of fish than Colorado?" he asked as we waited for our Uber. "Definitely. Maybe we'll see some tropical fish while we're snorkeling." "Do you think Daddy would have liked snorkeling?" The question caught me off guard. Daniel rarely mentioned Marcus anymore without prompting. "I think he would have loved it. Your dad always liked trying new things." "I wish I could remember more about him," Daniel said quietly. "Sometimes I think I'm forgetting what his voice sounded like." I squeezed his hand. "That's okay, baby. What matters is that you remember how much he loved you." The flight to Miami was crowded with spring break travelers, and our seats were toward the back of the plane. Daniel pressed his face to the window during takeoff, narrating everything he saw as Denver fell away below us. I was helping him with his seatbelt when I noticed the commotion a few rows ahead. A man was struggling to fit his carry-on bag into the overhead compartment, and the flight attendant was helping him rearrange other passengers' luggage. When he turned to thank her, my heart stopped. The profile was unmistakable. The slope of his nose, the way he held his shoulders, that particular shade of brown hair that caught light in a way I'd memorized years ago. But it couldn't be. I was seeing things projecting Marcus onto a stranger because I was nervous about traveling for the first time since his death. Then the man sat down, and I caught a glimpse of his left hand. There, on his ring finger, was a thin, white line where a wedding ring used to be. A line exactly like the one Marcus had from wearing his gold band for 8 years. Mom, Daniel tugged on my sleeve. "You look weird. Are you okay?" I forced a smile, my heart hammering so hard I was sure other passengers could hear it. "I'm fine, sweetie. Just making sure we have everything." But I wasn't fine. During the safety demonstration and takeoff, I kept stealing glances at the man 4 rows ahead. He was traveling with a young blonde woman who looked about 25, pretty in an obvious way that made my stomach clench with emotions I didn't want to examine. When we reached cruising altitude and people started moving around the cabin, I got a better look at him. The man stood up to retrieve something from the overhead bin, and I saw his face in 3/4 profile. There, just below his left ear, was a small crescent-shaped scar. The scar Marcus had gotten falling off his bike when he was 12, the one I'd traced with my finger thousands of times during our marriage. My vision went gray around the edges. This wasn't my imagination playing tricks on me. This wasn't grief-induced hallucination. Marcus Mitchell, my husband Daniel's father, the man we'd buried in an empty grave 3 years ago, was sitting 4 rows ahead of me on a flight to Miami. "I need to use the bathroom," I whispered to Daniel, my voice barely audible. "Do you want me to come with you?" "No, baby. Stay in your seat. I'll be right back." I stumbled down the aisle on unsteady legs, my mind reeling. If Marcus was alive, where had he been for 3 years? Why had he let us believe he was dead? And who was the woman laughing at his jokes like she had every right to be there? When I reached the lavatory, Marcus was just emerging from it. We nearly collided in the narrow aisle, and for a split second we were face to face. His eyes widened in complete recognition before his expression went carefully blank. "Excuse me," he said politely, as if he'd never seen me before in his life. I stood frozen, watching my supposedly dead husband walk back to his seat next to another woman, while our 8-year-old son sat 20 feet away, completely unaware that his father was alive and breathing on the same airplane. For the rest of the flight, I sat in shock. Daniel colored in his activity book and asked questions about Miami that I answered automatically, but my mind was spinning with implications I couldn't process. If Marcus was alive, Everything I'd believed about the past 3 years was a lie. His death, our grief, the insurance money, my careful reconstruction of our lives, all of it built on a foundation of deception. When we landed in Miami, I watched Marcus and his companion collect their bags and disappear into the crowd. Every instinct screamed at me to follow them to demand answers, to grab Marcus by the shirt and shake him until he explained why he'd let his son cry himself to sleep for 3 years. But Daniel was tugging on my hand, excited about finding our hotel shuttle, and I couldn't risk traumatizing him with a scene he wasn't prepared to witness. Instead, I followed the signs to baggage claim my mind, already working on a plan. Miami was a big city, but it wasn't infinite. If Marcus was here, I would find him. And when I did, he was going to tell me exactly why he'd chosen to let us mourn him while he started a new life with someone else. Our hotel, the Beacon Bay Resort, was everything the travel website had promised. Palm trees, ocean views, and staff members who greeted us with genuine smiles and complimentary drinks. Under normal circumstances, I would have been enchanted by the tropical paradise atmosphere. But nothing about these circumstances was normal. "Mom, look! You can see dolphins from our balcony." Daniel pressed his nose against the sliding glass door of our ocean view room. "At least I think those are dolphins. They could be sharks." "Do you think they're friendly sharks?" "Those are pelicans, sweetheart," I said, mechanically unpacking our clothes while my mind raced with plans for finding Marcus. "Can we go swimming right now? Please, the pool has a slide." "Let's get settled first, then we'll explore." But settling felt impossible when every cell in my body was screaming that my dead husband was somewhere in this city living a lie while his son built sandcastles alone. That evening, after Daniel finally fell asleep clutching his stuffed elephant, I sat on our balcony trying to formulate a strategy. Miami had thousands of hotels, hundreds of restaurants, countless places where Marcus could be hiding. But I had advantages he didn't know about. I knew his habits, his preferences, his favorite types of places. Then I heard voices from the balcony directly below ours. "Tired of the lies, Michael," a young woman was saying, her voice tight with frustration. "This isn't what I signed up for." "Camilla, please," a man replied, and my entire body went cold. That voice, that exact intonation when he was trying to placate someone upset. It was definitely Marcus. "Give me a little more time. I can explain everything." "Explain what? The fake name, the cash-only lifestyle, the way you wake up every night calling out for Sarah." Sarah. He'd been calling my name in his sleep. "It's complicated," Marcus said, and I could picture him running his hands through his hair the way he always did when he felt cornered. "There are things about my past that you don't understand. Then help me understand. Because right now, I feel like I'm dating a ghost who's pretending to be alive." I crept to the edge of our balcony and peered down. Marcus was standing with his back to me, wearing khaki shorts and a white polo shirt. Even from above, his posture was achingly familiar. The way he shifted his weight when he was uncomfortable, the gesture he made with his left hand when he was thinking hard about what to say next. "Some mistakes are too big to fix," Marcus said quietly. "Some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt." "That's your choice," Camilla replied, and I could hear tears in her voice. "But I won't be part of whatever game you're playing anymore. I'm flying back to Atlanta tomorrow morning." "Camilla, wait." But I heard a door slam and then silence. I sat back in my chair, my hands shaking so violently I had to clasp them together to make them stop. Marcus was alive. He was using the name Michael. He'd been in a relationship with a woman named Camilla, but he'd never told her about his wife or son. He was here in Miami, staying one floor below me, and he had no idea we were here. The rational part of my mind said I should call the police immediately. Marcus had committed insurance fraud, identity fraud, and probably a dozen other crimes. The mother in me said I should protect Daniel from whatever mess Marcus had created. But the woman in me, the woman who'd loved Marcus Mitchell completely and been destroyed by his loss, wanted answers first. I needed to know why he'd let us mourn him. I needed to know if he'd ever planned to come back to us. I needed to know if our marriage had meant anything to him at all. I pulled out my hotel phone and started to dial the front desk to ask about registering guests named Michael, then stopped. Once I involved hotel security or the police, there would be no going back. Daniel would learn that his father had abandoned us deliberately, that every tear he'd cried for 3 years had been based on a lie. No, I would handle this myself. I would get answers, and then I would decide what Daniel needed to know, and when he needed to know it. The next morning, I watched from our balcony as Camilla left the hotel with her suitcase, tears streaming down her face. Marcus tried to follow her to the lobby, but she waved him off without looking back. After she drove away in a taxi, Marcus stood alone in the hotel driveway for a long time, staring at the ocean like it might provide answers he couldn't find anywhere else. That evening, after I'd tucked Daniel into bed with a story about pirates who always kept their promises, I made a decision that would change everything again. I was going to find Marcus, and I was going to make him explain why he'd chosen to let his family believe he was dead. The hotel bar was softly lit with candles and jazz music, the kind of place that encouraged quiet conversations and intimate confessions. Marcus was sitting alone at the far end of the bar, staring into a glass of bourbon like it contained solutions to problems I couldn't imagine. I approached slowly, my heels clicking on the polished floor. When I was 3 seats away, I sat down and ordered a glass of wine I didn't want. "Rough night?" I asked, as if I were just another hotel guest making casual conversation. Marcus looked up, and for just a moment I saw complete recognition flash across his face. Terror, guilt, and something that might have been relief all mixed together before his expression went carefully neutral. "You could say that," he replied, gesturing to the empty stool beside him. "Care to join me in drowning some sorrows?" I moved to the seat next to him, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "What kind of sorrows need drowning in paradise?" "The kind that follow you no matter how far you run," Marcus said, taking a long sip of his bourbon. "Running from something specific?" "Someone I used to be." Marcus signaled the bartender for another drink. "Ever feel like you've made such a complete mess of your life that the only solution is to become someone else entirely?" The irony was suffocating. Here was my husband talking to me about becoming someone else while pretending not to know me. "That sounds extreme." "Sometimes extreme measures are the only option." Marcus's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. 3 years ago, I was a different person. I had a wife, a son, a business that looked successful from the outside. But I was drowning in it all. The pressure, the expectations, the complications I'd created. "What kind of complications?" Marcus studied my face as if trying to decide how much to reveal to a stranger. "Financial ones. I made some very bad decisions, trusted the wrong people, put the people I loved in serious danger." "So you ran away?" "I disappeared," he corrected. "Let everyone think I was dead. It seemed like the only way to protect them." My wine glass was trembling in my hand. I set it down carefully, afraid I might throw it at him. "Protect them from what?" "From the people I owed money to. From the consequences of my mistakes." My son was only 5, young enough to adapt to build a life without the complications I brought to it. And my wife. Marcus's voice caught slightly. She was strong, stronger than me. I knew she'd find a way to give him the stable life he deserved. "You sound very certain about that." "I have to be," Marcus said quietly. "It's the only way I can live with what I did." The casual way he dismissed us, like we were characters in someone else's story, made me want to scream. Instead, I took a careful sip of wine and asked, "Do you ever think about them, your wife and son?" "Every day," Marcus admitted. "I wonder if my son still remembers me, if he's happy, if he's learned to ride a bike yet. I wonder if my wife has found someone who can give her the life she deserves." "And if she hasn't, if she's still mourning you," Marcus flinched. "Then I hope someday she'll understand that I left because I loved her too much to drag her down with me." "That sounds like something you tell yourself to feel better about abandoning them." "Maybe it is. Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. But the alternative was watching them get hurt because of my mistakes. We sat in uncomfortable silence. The jazz trio in the corner started playing The Way You Look Tonight, a song Marcus used to hum while making pancakes on Sunday mornings. I wondered if he remembered. "What about the woman you were with?" I asked. "The blonde woman I saw you arguing with last night?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "How do you—" "Hotel walls are thin," I lied. I heard voices on the balcony. "Camilla." Marcus rubbed his forehead, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. She is someone who fell in love with a person who doesn't really exist." "And who do you exist as now?" "Michael Harrison," he said without hesitation. "That's who I've been for 3 years. That's who I have to keep being." "Michael Harrison sounds like someone who doesn't deserve to be loved." Marcus looked at me sharply. "What makes you say that?" "Because Michael Harrison is built on a lie, and love based on lies isn't really love at all." For a moment, his carefully constructed mask slipped completely. I saw the Marcus I'd married, vulnerable, scared, desperately wanting to be understood, but terrified of being known. "Sometimes lies are kinder than the truth," he said. "Not to the people living them." Marcus finished his drink and stood up abruptly. "Thank you for the conversation, Miss Sarah," I said, watching his face carefully. "My name is Sarah." He froze for just a second, his hand gripping the back of his bar stool until his knuckles went white. Then he nodded politely. "Thank you for listening, Sarah. It's been illuminating." As he walked toward the elevator, I called after him. "Michael." He stopped but didn't turn around. The truth has a way of surfacing eventually, even when we bury it as deep as we think we can. He left without another word, but I saw his shoulders shake slightly as he walked away. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't the only one carrying the weight of Marcus Mitchell's secrets. Tomorrow, I decided it was time for the truth to surface completely. I woke up the next morning with a plan. I was going to find Marcus again, tell him exactly who I was, and demand a full explanation before deciding what to tell Daniel. But plans, I've learned, have a way of being derailed by forces beyond our control. Daniel and I had just finished breakfast and were heading to the beach when I noticed the man watching us from across the hotel lobby. He was thin, balding, maybe 50 years old, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow that made his face look perpetually skeptical. The description from Marcus's letter flashed through my mind. Watch for a man named Silas. Thin, balding scar through his left eyebrow. He's the one who takes photographs. My blood turned to ice. Silas, the man Marcus had warned me about 3 years ago, was here in Miami, and he was watching Daniel. "Mom, can we build a castle with a moat today?" Daniel asked, oblivious to the danger 20 feet away. "Actually, sweetheart, I think we should go back to our room for a minute. I forgot something." "But Mom..." "Now, Daniel." Something in my tone must have warned him not to argue. We walked quickly to the elevator, and I used the polished doors as mirrors to confirm that Silas was following us. He stayed back, professional in his surveillance, but there was no doubt he was tracking our movements. In our room, I locked the door and fastened the security chain, my mind racing. How had Silas found us? Had he been watching us for 3 years, waiting for the right moment? Or had someone tipped him off that we were in Miami? Mom, you're scaring me," Daniel said, sitting on the bed with his arms wrapped around his stuffed elephant. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, baby, you did nothing wrong. But I need you to listen very carefully. We might need to leave Miami earlier than planned." "Why, I thought we were going snorkeling today." "Sometimes plans change. If I tell you to stay close to me or to go somewhere quickly, you need to do it without arguing, okay?" Daniel nodded solemnly. Is someone trying to hurt us? I wanted to lie to protect him from the fear that had haunted me for years. But if we were in real danger, he needed to understand the seriousness of the situation. "There's a man who might want to hurt us because of some bad decisions Daddy made before he died. I need you to help me keep us both safe." "What kind of bad decisions?" "Money decisions. Daddy borrowed money from very bad people, and even though he's gone, they think we might have that money. Do we? No, sweetheart, we don't, but they don't believe that. I spent the next hour trying to figure out our options. We could leave Miami immediately, but Silas would just follow us home to Denver. We could call the police, but what would I tell them? That a man I suspected of being connected to criminals was watching us based on a letter from my supposedly dead husband. Then I realized there was a third option. If Silas was here in Miami, he was probably here for the same reason I was, because he'd somehow discovered that Marcus was alive, which meant Marcus was in just as much danger as we were. That afternoon, I left Daniel with the hotel's kids club and went looking for Marcus. I found him at a beachside cafe 2 blocks from our hotel, sitting alone at a corner table, constantly scanning the other patrons like a man who knew he was being hunted. I approached his table slowly, and when he looked up and saw me, his face went through a series of emotions. Surprise, fear, resignation, and finally something that looked like relief. "Hello, Marcus," I said, sitting down across from him. "We need to talk." "Sarah." My name came out like a prayer. "How did you find me?" "The same way Silas found you, I suspect. You're not as invisible as you think you are." Marcus went pale. "Silas is here." A thin, balding scar through his left eyebrow. "He's been watching Daniel and me since this morning." "Jesus." Marcus buried his face in his hands. "This is exactly what I was trying to prevent." "Well, congratulations. Your plan to protect us by faking your death has put your 8-year-old son directly in the crosshairs of the people you were hiding from." 8 years old, Marcus repeated quietly. "He's 8 now." "Yes, he's 8. He's brilliant and funny and kind, and he spent the last 3 years asking me why God took his daddy away. And now, because you're apparently not as dead as you led everyone to believe, he's in danger from criminals who think we have money that we never had in the first place." Marcus looked up at me, and I saw that his eyes were filled with tears. "Sarah, I can explain everything. But first, we need to get you and Daniel somewhere safe." "Safe from what exactly? Who is Silas, and why is he here?" "Silas works for Vincent Torino, the man I borrowed money from in Vegas. I paid off the debt 2 years ago, every penny with interest. But Silas thinks I held back some of the money, maybe hid it with my family before I disappeared." Did you know every dollar I earned over the past 3 years went to paying off that debt? I've been living like a monk, Sarah. 1-room apartments, rice and beans for dinner, working construction jobs for cash. I haven't touched a penny that wasn't rightfully mine." "Then why is Silas here?" "Because someone told him I was alive. Someone who wants to collect the bounty Torino put on my head." "What bounty?" Marcus met my eyes directly. $50,000 for proof that I faked my death. 100,000 if they can recover the money Torino thinks I stole." "Money you don't have." "Money I never had. But try explaining that to people who make their living through violence." I felt sick. "So what do we do?" "We run," Marcus said immediately. "I get you and Daniel out of Miami somewhere Silas can't find you. Then I disappear again, and hopefully he follows me instead of you." "No." The word came out harder than I'd intended. "I'm done running from your mistakes, Marcus. We're going to handle this together, or Daniel loses both his parents." "Sarah, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You made a mess, tried to clean it up by abandoning your family, and now your mess has found us anyway. So we're going to fix it properly this time. All of us together." Marcus stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "You want to stay and fight people who kill for a living?" "I want to stop running from shadows. I want our son to have at least one parent who doesn't disappear when things get difficult. And Marcus..." I leaned across the table so he could see how serious I was. "I want you to finally face the consequences of your choices instead of leaving other people to deal with them." For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Then he nodded slowly. "Okay, we do this together. But Sarah, if anything happens to you or Daniel, nothing's going to happen to us," I said firmly. "Because for the first time in 4 years, we're going to be smarter than the people trying to hurt us." I just hoped I was right. We spent that afternoon planning like we were preparing for war, which in a way we were. Marcus explained that Silas typically worked alone, but was methodical and patient. He'd been tracking Marcus's movements for months, probably through financial records, employment databases, and the kind of underground information networks that people like Vincent Torino used to find debtors who thought they'd disappeared. The good news is that Silas prefers to work quietly, Marcus told me as we sat in his hotel room planning our next moves. He won't try anything violent in a crowded place, and he won't want to involve law enforcement. What's the bad news? He's very good at his job, and he's convinced that I have money hidden somewhere that belongs to his boss. How do we convince him otherwise? We don't, Marcus said grimly. We make him go away. That evening, I collected Daniel from the kids' club and brought him to Marcus's room. It was time for the reunion I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. Daniel, I said gently, there's someone here who wants to see you. Daniel looked around the hotel room curiously, then focused on Marcus, who was sitting in a chair by the window. For a long moment, father and son just stared at each other. You're not dead, Daniel said finally, his voice matter-of-fact in the way that only children can manage. No, buddy, Marcus said quietly. I'm not dead, but Mom said you were in heaven. Mom thought I was in heaven. I let everyone think that because some very bad people were trying to hurt our family? Daniel processed this information with 8-year-old logic. So, you were hiding? Yes, I was hiding to keep you and Mom safe. Did it work? Marcus glanced at me, and I could see the pain in his eyes. Not the way I hoped it would. Daniel walked over to Marcus and studied his face carefully. You look older. I feel older. Did you miss me? Every single day, Marcus said, his voice breaking. I missed you so much it felt like part of me was missing. Daniel climbed onto Marcus's lap and hugged him tightly. I missed you too, Daddy. I kept all my loose teeth for the tooth fairy, but I saved one for you. I had to look away, because the love between them was so intense it felt private. But we didn't have time for lengthy reunions. Somewhere in this hotel, Silas was watching and waiting for his opportunity. Listen, both of you, I said, interrupting their moment. We have a serious problem to solve together. I explained the situation to Daniel in terms he could understand. Bad people thought we had money that wasn't ours, and we needed to prove we didn't have it while staying safe. Are we going to call the police? Daniel asked. The police can't help us with this kind of problem, Marcus explained. These aren't the kind of bad guys who get arrested and go to jail. They're the kind who disappear before the police can find them. So what do we do? Marcus and I looked at each other. We'd spent the afternoon developing a plan that was risky, but might work if we executed it perfectly. We're going to prove to the bad guys that we don't have their money, I said. And we're going to do it in a way that makes them leave us alone forever. How? By being smarter than they are, Marcus said, and by working together as a family. That night, we put our plan into motion. Marcus made a series of phone calls from the hotel business center using encrypted communication apps to contact people from his 3 years in hiding. He was calling in favors, activating a network of contacts I'd never known existed. Meanwhile, I used my banking connections to trace the financial records that had led Silas to us. If we could figure out exactly how he'd found us, we could control the narrative and feed him the information we wanted him to have. By midnight, we had the pieces in place. The next day, we would either prove our innocence and secure our freedom, or we would all be running for the rest of our lives. Are you sure about this? Marcus asked as we reviewed the plan one final time. I'm sure about one thing, I replied. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. I'm tired of Daniel growing up thinking his parents are victims. And if it doesn't work, then at least we'll face the consequences together as a family. Marcus reached over and took my hand, the first time he'd touched me since our confrontation in the bar. Sarah, I need you to know that everything I did because I love you and Daniel more than my own life. I know, I said. But love without trust isn't enough, Marcus. If we survive this, if we build something new together, it has to be based on honesty. No more secrets. No more unilateral decisions. No more running away when things get difficult. No more running, Marcus agreed. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. But as I lay awake that night, listening to Daniel's peaceful breathing from the rollaway bed, and Marcus's restless movements in the chair where he'd insisted on keeping watch. I couldn't shake the feeling that our plan was missing something crucial. Silas had been hunting people like Marcus for years. He was patient, experienced, and utterly ruthless. If we underestimated him, if we made even one mistake, Daniel would pay the price for our failures. Tomorrow would determine whether the Mitchell family had a future, or whether Marcus's 3-year absence would become permanent in a way none of us had imagined. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect Miami day that should have been filled with beach activities and family fun. Instead, we were preparing for a confrontation that would determine whether our family had any future at all. The plan was simple in concept, but required precise timing and nerves of steel. We would meet Silas at Bayside Park, a public location with multiple escape routes and enough foot traffic to discourage violence. Marcus would present evidence that he had no hidden money. I would provide banking records showing our financial situation, and we would offer Silas proof that pursuing us further would be a waste of his time. What we hadn't counted on was Silas bringing backup. "There are 3 of them," Marcus said quietly as we approached the designated meeting spot. "Silas and 2 men I don't recognize." "Does that change anything?" I asked, gripping Daniel's hand tighter. "It changes everything. Silas must be more convinced than I thought that we have something worth taking." We were walking along the waterfront path when Silas stepped out from behind a maintenance building, blocking our way forward. He was exactly as Marcus had described, thin, balding with a scar through his left eyebrow that gave him a permanently skeptical expression. "Marcus Mitchell," Silas said, his voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't place. "Or should I say Michael Harrison? You've been a very difficult man to find." "Silas," Marcus replied instinctively, moving to put himself between Silas and Daniel. "I hear you've been looking for me. Mr. Torino has been very interested in your whereabouts, especially since we learned about your miraculous resurrection from the dead. I paid my debt to Torino, every penny with interest. We're square." "That's not what our accounting shows." Silas pulled out a tablet and showed Marcus a spreadsheet covered in numbers. "According to our records, you still owe Mr. Torino $1.7 million. That's impossible. I paid $2.2 million over the past 3 years. I have receipts for every transaction." "Perhaps, but you see there were additional fees. Inconvenience charges for the trouble your disappearance caused, interest on the interest, penalties for making Mr. Torino think he'd lost a valuable client." I felt sick. They were making up new debts, creating reasons to keep pursuing us, no matter how much Marcus had already paid. What do you want?" I asked, stepping forward despite Marcus's attempt to keep me behind him. "Mrs. Mitchell," Silas said, turning his attention to me with a smile that made my skin crawl. "Or is it Mrs. Harrison, now hard to keep track of which identity your husband is using at any given moment?" "What do you want?" I repeated. "I want what belongs to Mr. Torino. $1.7 million plus the $50,000 penalty for faking his death." "We don't have that kind of money." Of course you do. The insurance payout alone was over $2 million, plus whatever Marcus has been earning under his new identity, plus whatever investments he made while pretending to be dead." Silas gestured to his companions who had positioned themselves to block our other escape routes. We were surrounded in a public park with my 8-year-old son Silas, and his men had us surrounded in Bayside Park with Daniel pressed between Marcus and me as tourists and joggers continued their morning routines, oblivious to the drama unfolding 20 feet away. 48 hours. Silas repeated, his eyes fixed on Daniel in a way that made my skin crawl. $1.75 million, or we explore other forms of compensation. That's when Marcus did something I didn't expect. Instead of panicking or trying to fight, he pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" Silas demanded. "Calling someone who can resolve this right now," Marcus said calmly, hitting a number on speed dial. "Agent Janet Martinez, FBI Financial Crimes Division." Silas went pale. "Hang up that phone. Agent Martinez, this is Marcus Mitchell. I'm in Bayside Park in Miami with Silas Kowalski, and 2 of Vincent Torino's associates. They're threatening my family and demanding money I don't have. Yes, ma'am, I can stay on the line. Marcus looked directly at Silas. Agent Martinez says to tell you that Vincent Torino was arrested this morning in Las Vegas on federal racketeering charges. His entire organization is being dismantled as we speak. She also says that threatening witnesses and their families carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 20 years in federal prison. You're bluffing, Silas said, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Am I? Marcus turned his phone's speaker on, and Agent Martinez's voice filled the air around us. Mr. Kowalski, this is Special Agent Martinez with the FBI. You and your associates need to leave the Mitchell family alone and surrender yourselves to the nearest federal building immediately. We have arrest warrants for all 3 of you. The tourists around us had stopped pretending not to notice our conversation. Several were openly recording with their phones, and I could see at least 2 people making calls that were probably to 911. Silas realized his situation had deteriorated beyond recovery. A quiet intimidation meeting had become a public incident with federal law enforcement involved and dozens of witnesses recording everything. This isn't over, he said to Marcus, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, it is, Marcus replied firmly. Because Vincent Torino is facing life in prison, and you're about to join him. The smart play here is to surrender and cooperate with the FBI. The stupid play is to keep threatening a federal witness and his family in front of 50 witnesses with cameras. Silas and his men backed away slowly, then disappeared into the crowd. But I knew they wouldn't get far. Within minutes, Miami police sirens were approaching from multiple directions. How did you know Torino had been arrested? I asked Marcus as we watched police cars flood the park entrance. I didn't, Marcus admitted. But I've been working with Agent Martinez for 6 months, providing information about Torino's operation. She told me the arrests were imminent, so I gambled that they'd happen this morning. 6 months. I stared at him. You've been cooperating with the FBI for 6 months and didn't tell me. I was trying to protect. No, I cut him off. We agreed no more secrets, no more unilateral decisions. You don't get to decide what I can handle. Marcus looked stricken. You're right. I'm sorry. I thought if I could resolve this without involving you and Daniel. That's exactly the kind of thinking that got us into this mess in the first place. Agent Martinez arrived 30 minutes later with a team of federal agents. Silas and his associates had been arrested trying to leave Miami International Airport. The threat to our family was officially over, but as we sat in the FBI field office giving our statements, I realized that ending the external threat was only the beginning of our problems. Marcus had admitted to Agent Martinez that he'd committed insurance fraud, tax evasion, and several other federal crimes. There would be consequences for those actions, and this time he couldn't run away from them. Mr. Mitchell, Agent Martinez said after taking our statements, you understand that your cooperation with our investigation doesn't grant you immunity from prosecution for your own crimes. I understand, Marcus said quietly. I'm prepared to face whatever charges you bring. The U.S. Attorney will likely offer you a plea agreement in exchange for your continued testimony against Torino's organization. But you're looking at significant prison time. I felt Daniel's hand slip into mine. He'd been listening to everything, understanding more than any 8-year-old should have to understand about his father's crimes and their consequences. How long? I asked. 3 to 5 years, most likely. Possibly less with good behavior and continued cooperation. That evening in our hotel room, the 3 of us sat on the bed talking about what came next. Are you going to jail, Daddy? Daniel asked with the direct honesty that children specialize in. Yes, buddy, I am. I made some very bad choices, and now I have to face the consequences. For how long? Maybe 3 years, maybe 5. I don't know yet. Daniel was quiet for a long time processing this information. Finally, he said, Will you come back when you get out? If you and your mom want me to, yes. I'll always want to be your father, Daniel. But I understand if you don't want me to be part of your lives after everything I've done. I want you to be my dad, Daniel said simply. But I also want you to stop making bad choices. I promise you, I will never make another choice that hurts our family. Never again. Okay, Daniel said, as if that settled the matter. But next time you want to do something dangerous, you have to ask Mom first. Deal, Marcus said, and for the first time in days, he smiled. 3 months later, Marcus stood in a Denver federal courthouse and pleaded guilty to insurance fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy charges. I sat in the gallery with Daniel watching the man I'd loved lost and found again accept responsibility for the choices that had torn our family apart. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in federal prison with the possibility of early release after 3 years for good behavior and continued cooperation with federal investigators. He was also ordered to pay full restitution, $2.1 million to the insurance companies plus penalties and interest. After the sentencing, we had 30 minutes to say goodbye before Marcus was taken into custody. I know this is hard, Marcus said, holding Daniel tightly. But I need you to be strong and take care of your mom, okay? I will, Daniel promised. And I'll write you letters every week. I'd like that very much. When it was my turn to say goodbye, Marcus and I stood facing each other in the courthouse hallway surrounded by lawyers and federal marshals, but feeling completely alone. I'm proud of you, I said quietly, for facing this, for taking responsibility. It's the right thing to do. Will you wait for me? Marcus asked. I know I don't have the right to ask, but I'll make sure Daniel knows his father and that you're part of his life when you get out, I said carefully. Beyond that, I can't make any promises. 4 years is a long time, Marcus. We'll all be different people when this is over. I understand, but I want you to know that I forgive you for all of it. The lies, the fake death, the choices that put Daniel in danger. I forgive you because holding on to anger won't help any of us move forward. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. That means more to me than you know. Just don't waste this chance, I said. Use these 4 years to become the man Daniel deserves as a father. Use them to figure out who you want to be when you come back to the world. I will, Marcus promised. I swear to you I will. The first year after Marcus went to prison was the hardest. Daniel struggled with having his father back in his life, only to lose him again, and I struggled with explaining to an 8-year-old why his daddy had to go to jail for trying to protect them. We moved back to Denver and into a smaller house in a different neighborhood. I returned to my job at First National Bank, and Daniel enrolled in a new school where nobody knew our story. We visited Marcus every Saturday at the Federal Correctional Institution in Colorado, maintaining the connection while building our own independent life. Mom, Daniel said one evening, about 6 months after Marcus's sentencing, do you think Dad is a bad person? We were doing homework at our kitchen table, and I set down my pen to give him my full attention. No, sweetheart. I think Dad is a good person who made some very bad choices. There's a difference. What's the difference? Bad people don't care when they hurt others. Your dad cared so much about not hurting us that he made choices that ended up hurting us anyway. That makes him someone who made mistakes, not someone who's bad. Will he make mistakes again when he gets out? Probably. We all make mistakes. But I think he's learned how to make better choices and how to ask for help when he doesn't know what to do. Daniel seemed satisfied with that explanation, but the questions continued as he processed his father's absence and the complicated emotions that came with loving someone who'd caused so much upheaval in their lives. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Patricia Reeves, who specialized in helping families navigate trauma and rebuilding trust. She helped me work through my anger, my grief, and my confusion about what I wanted our family to look like when Marcus was released. You don't have to decide right now whether you want to reconcile romantically, Dr. Reeves told me during one session. You can focus on healing yourself and supporting Daniel and see how you feel when Marcus comes home. I feel guilty for not knowing, I admitted. He's paying for his mistakes, and I should know whether I want to rebuild our marriage or move on without him. Forgiveness doesn't require romantic reconciliation, Dr. Reeves said gently. You can forgive Marcus and still choose not to be married to him. You can co-parent effectively without being lovers. There's no right or wrong answer here, only what's healthiest for you and Daniel. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my own life in ways I'd never had the opportunity to explore before. I took evening classes in financial planning, started volunteering with a local organization that helped women navigate divorce and financial independence, and began dating carefully and selectively. 2 years into Marcus's sentence, I met David Chen, the son of Marcus's former business partner and a middle school teacher who specialized in working with children from complicated family situations. David was kind, patient, and completely unintimidated by my complicated past. "So your husband faked his death, got involved with organized crime, and is currently in federal prison," David said on our third date, summarizing my situation with a slight smile. "That's the short version, yes. And you have a 10-year-old son who visits his father in prison every weekend. Every Saturday, rain or shine. Sounds like you're handling an impossible situation with a lot of grace." Some days, I feel graceful. Other days, I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water. "That's what makes you interesting," David said. "Anyone can handle easy. It takes character to handle complicated." David and I dated for 8 months before I introduced him to Daniel, and another 6 months before Daniel felt comfortable with the idea of David being a regular part of our lives. But by the time Marcus had served 3 years of his sentence, David was essentially living with us, and Daniel had accepted him as a stable, caring presence in his life. "Does this mean you're not getting back together with Dad?" Daniel asked one evening after David had helped him with his math homework. "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but it means I'm building a life that makes me happy, and that includes David right now. Is that okay, even though Dad is in prison?" "Yes, sweetheart. Your dad and I both want each other to be happy, even if that happiness looks different than we originally planned." "Good," Daniel said, "because I like David. He's good at math and he doesn't try to replace Dad." Marcus was released from federal prison on a cold February morning in 2027 after serving 3.5 years of his 4-year sentence. Daniel and I were there to pick him up along with David, who'd insisted on coming to support Daniel during what he knew would be an emotionally complicated day. The man who walked out of prison was different from the one who'd walked in. Marcus had lost weight, gained muscle from the prison gym, and carried himself with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. He looked older, more mature, and somehow more peaceful. "Dad!" Daniel ran to him immediately, and Marcus swept him up in a hug that lasted for several minutes. "Look at you," Marcus said, holding Daniel at arm's length. "You're almost as tall as your mom now." "I'm in 7th grade now," Daniel said proudly, "and I made the honor roll every semester." "I'm so proud of you." When Marcus turned to me, the moment was more complicated. We hugged briefly, carefully, like old friends who cared about each other, but weren't sure how to navigate their changed relationship. "Sarah," Marcus said quietly, "thank you for bringing Daniel. Thank you for everything." "This is David," I said, introducing the man who'd been part of our lives for the past 1.5 years. "David Chen." Marcus and David shook hands politely, both men understanding the complexity of the situation they were navigating. "Thank you for taking care of my family," Marcus said. "They're pretty amazing people," David replied. "Daniel's told me a lot about you." "All good things, I hope." "The important things," David said diplomatically. Over the following months, we worked out a new normal that none of us could have imagined 5 years earlier. Marcus found a job with a construction company that specialized in hiring former felons, and he rented a small apartment 15 minutes from our house. He saw Daniel 3 evenings a week and every other weekend, and we had family dinners together once a week where David was also welcome. It was awkward at first. 2 men who cared about the same woman and child trying to figure out how to coexist for everyone's benefit. But Marcus and David gradually developed a mutual respect based on their shared commitment to Daniel's well-being. This is weird," Daniel observed one evening after a particularly successful family dinner where Marcus and David had bonded over their mutual love of baseball. "But it's good weird." "What makes it good weird?" I asked. "Because everyone's being honest about what they want, and nobody's trying to pretend things are different than they are." Once again, my 12-year-old son had identified the key to our success. Honesty, even when it was uncomfortable, had become the foundation of all our relationships. That summer, Marcus and I had the conversation we'd been avoiding for 3 years. "I know you're with David now," Marcus said as we watched Daniel play in a Little League game. "And I know you're happy with him." "I am happy," I confirmed. "Are you okay with that?" "I want you to be happy, Sarah. I want you to have the life you deserve with someone who can give you the stability and partnership I never could." "And what do you want for yourself?" Marcus was quiet for a long time, watching our son steal second base with a grin that lit up his entire face. "I want to be the best father I can be to Daniel," he said finally. "I want to rebuild my life in a way that makes amends for the damage I caused. And I want to find my own happiness, whatever that looks like." "Are you ready to start dating again?" "Maybe. Someday. Right now I'm focused on being present for the life I have, instead of always reaching for something more." 6 months later, Marcus and I officially divorced. It was a strange experience, legally ending a marriage that had been emotionally over for years, but practically ongoing because of our shared commitment to Daniel. "How do you feel?" David asked me after I came home from the courthouse. "Free," I said, and realized it was true. For the first time in 8 years, I feel completely free to choose my own future. "And what do you choose?" I looked at this kind, patient man who'd loved me through the most complicated period of my life, who'd accepted my son as his own, who'd never asked me to choose between my past and my future. "I choose us," I said. "If you'll have us." David's smile was radiant. "I thought you'd never ask." 5 years later, I'm writing this in the kitchen of the house David and I bought together in Cherry Hills Village. Ironically, just 3 blocks from the house where Marcus and I started our original family. Daniel is 17 now, a senior in high school, with early admission to CU Boulder's engineering program. He's tall and confident, with Marcus's quick wit and David's steady kindness and my stubborn determination to see the best in people even when they've disappointed him. Marcus lives in a townhouse across town and manages construction projects for a company that builds affordable housing. He's been in a steady relationship for 2 years with Elena, a social worker, who specializes in helping formerly incarcerated individuals reintegrate into society. Elena understands Marcus's past without being defined by it, and Daniel likes her because she doesn't try too hard to win his approval. David and I married 3 years ago in a small ceremony that Daniel helped plan, and Marcus attended with genuine happiness for our new beginning. We're expecting our first child together in the spring, a daughter who will grow up knowing that families come in all different shapes and that love is stronger than the mistakes people make. "Are you nervous about having a sister?" I asked Daniel last week as he helped David assemble the crib. "Nah." Daniel said, his attention focused on the instruction manual. "I've gotten pretty good at handling complicated family situations." "And how do you feel about your dad being with Elena?" "I'm happy for him. He deserves to have someone who loves him for who he is, now not who he used to be." The wisdom of teenagers never ceases to amaze me. This Sunday, like most Sundays, we'll all have dinner together. Marcus and Elena, David, and me, Daniel, and soon our daughter. We'll talk about Daniel's college plans, Marcus's latest construction project, David's students, and the ordinary details of lives being lived honestly and fully. People often ask me how I can sit at the same table with the man who put my family through so much trauma, how I can trust him around my son, how I can forgive someone who lied to me for years and let me believe he was dead. The answer isn't simple or noble or easy to understand. I can do these things because Marcus proved through his actions, not his words, that he had genuinely changed. He served his time without complaint, paid every penny of restitution, and rebuilt his relationship with Daniel through consistent patient effort over many years. But mostly, I can do these things because I learned that forgiveness isn't about erasing the past or pretending damage didn't happen. Forgiveness is about choosing not to let past pain define your future possibilities. It's about building something new from the wreckage of what was broken. Marcus and I will never be married again. Too much trust was broken. Too many lies were told. Too much damage was done to our romantic relationship. But we've become something different and in many ways better. Effective co-parents, genuine friends, and people who've learned to value what we have instead of mourning what we lost. The avalanche on Vale Pass took 3 years of our lives and changed us in ways we never could have imagined. But it also taught us what really mattered, forced us to rebuild our relationships on foundations of honesty instead of illusion, and showed us that sometimes the best thing you can do for the people you love is to face the consequences of your actions instead of running away from them. Daniel will graduate next month with honors, having never known a moment of instability since his father returned from prison. He's applying for internships with engineering firms that specialize in sustainable construction. Inspired, he says, by watching his father build affordable housing for families who need fresh starts. "I want to create things that help people build better lives," Daniel told me when he submitted his college application essays. "Like you and Dad and David did for me, sometimes children see truths that adults spend years learning to understand. Our daughter will grow up in a world where divorced parents can be friends, where stepfathers can love children as fiercely as biological fathers, where families are defined by commitment rather than blood or legal documents. She'll know that people make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones, but that mistakes don't have to define who someone becomes. Most importantly, she'll know that love is a choice you make every day, not a feeling that happens to you. That families are built through thousands of small acts of care and commitment, not through grand gestures or perfect circumstances." This is what the avalanche spared, not Marcus's life, but our capacity to build something meaningful from the debris of our broken dreams. Not our original family, but our ability to create new forms of family based on truth instead of illusion. Tonight, I'll read Daniel a story about his biological father's courage in facing consequences, and his stepfather's patience in loving a complicated family, and his mother's strength in choosing hope over fear. Tomorrow, I'll feel our daughter kick and know that she's already part of a family that's learned how to weather any storm. And someday, when she's old enough to understand, I'll tell her the whole story. About the man who tried to save his family by disappearing, about the woman who learned to save herself by staying, and about the boy who grew up knowing that the best families are the ones that choose each other every single day. Because that's what the avalanche really spared, our ability to choose love over fear, truth over comfort, and each other over the easier path of giving up. And that, it turns out, was worth saving after all.